When we talk about policies, I use this analogy, the bulldozer at the door effect. And that means when the bulldozer's at the door, it's too late, right? And so when you are informed and you're moving through your understanding the local politics and policies, you can have that voice to speak out loud.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You good? Oh, you can continue.
Yeah.
Are you good?
I'm good.
Keep kicking it to Joe.
Yeah,
Thank you for
that.
that.
I gave him that look. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I have a little different take on that personally. So I'm the elected Commonwealth attorney for the city of Charlottesville. Mm-hmm. It's a constitutional office. So there's sheriff, treasurer, clerk of court, Commonwealth attorney, and commissioner of the revenue. I think there's 5 constitutional offices. So all the time people are like thinking prosecutors work for the police or work for victims, or we and I don't. I answer every 4 years to the citizens and the voters of the city of Charlottesville. That's who I work for.
Right.
So another important thing about elections is, I work for the voters. I work for the people. They're my boss. And so I think
that's important.
It's really important. And people need to understand that's why it matters for you to go vote. Like, these elected officials work for your listeners. Mm-hmm. And that's really important. And they should have a say in it. And, people like Harold and others hold them accountable. And then also we're going to get to the Expungement Clinic, but there's elections for House of Delegates and State Senate. These are the people that write the laws on what can and can't be expunged. And it's an important thing. And Harold and others have done some great work to get legislation passed. But if we want to broaden expungement, which a lot of us want to, myself included, we need elected delegates and senators that are going to help us change the law in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And then let me ask you this, though, because I had to look this up. Why is that so? Why is it such an oversight so many times of when it comes to our elected officials, or even not even just elected officials? You can even go into positions who are created to serve, right, the greater good, to serve the Commonwealth. A lot of times, like, that gets lost, right? And people look at it, they call it career politicians sometimes, right? People doing what they have to do just to stay in office. And I'm not even sure what perspective you want to, or viewpoint you want to take on that answer, but I'm curious, like, how you are able to keep that in mind, because I was happy to hear you say that, on how, like, you work for the people, but there's so many of our officials who sort of lose sight of who they work for.
Well, I think there's 2 things. The biggest and most important thing is, I think, making sure that you continue to be humble and understand it's a privilege to serve. And that's easy to pay lip service to. Oh, I'm humble. I want to be humble. Well, all right, show me. Where's the proof about your humility? Like, how are you acting out the words that you're saying? And what we try and do, and we're getting back to after COVID, is to have people in our office, especially prosecutors, out interacting with the community. I mean, you just rattled off a ton of cool stuff that's going on. We're all interconnected.
That's right.
We're all interconnected. And so we have our prosecutors, like, going to court and doing that sort of stuff. It's part of the job. But the other part of the job, and maybe the most important part, to answer your question and to spread the word and to educate folks and introduce ourselves and answer questions and maybe hear some props, but maybe hear some criticisms, is to be out in the community, talking to people, doing stuff. Chief Kachis, our new chief of police, does community walks every Thursday. Our prosecutors are out, walking neighborhoods with them, talking to folks, answering questions. So I think part of it is us getting the word out a little more. And then I think people listening to a show like this, where you're pushing that message out and educating folks, is important.
I appreciate that. That's right.
Yeah, just trying to piggyback off of your comments just now. When you talk about criticisms, particularly of your office, if you could be completely candid, what is the biggest criticism that you're receiving right now, maybe of your position itself or of your office, and how you're working to, change that?
Well, I think one of the things that's been, and maybe Harold would be better to, answer it, but you asked me, and I think one of the things that we always have to keep an eye on is, why are we prosecuting someone? What are we prosecuting them for? And there's a bunch of different ways prosecutions can end. Mm-hmm. Is jail a first option or a last resort? Is a felony conviction, when someone doesn't need a felony, a first option or a last resort? diversion, drug treatment court, therapeutic docket, restorative justice. What are we doing to look at sort of on the front end, not even getting people pulled into the system? Because Harold knows all too well, once you're in the system, it's so tough to get out of it, even, you know, after the conviction and it's on your record and probation. So I think a legitimate criticism that is kind of continuous is us looking on the front end, the decisions we make, and doing a good job of understanding the consequences for the decisions we make, and just being mindful of that and not always getting that right. So I think there's some criticism about, you know, maybe something's over prosecuted or you were too punitive. So I think that's kind of a general thing we always try and keep our eye on.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess I was also going to respond to that little tidbit, because I'm wondering if that criticism comes from the inside, you know, the individuals that you're working with, the police department, the judicial system, judges and things like that, or if this is coming from the community members.
I think probably that's more of the community. You just made me think of another criticism. I would say we get, I'm not saying it's not legitimate, we get some pushback and criticism from law enforcement that as an office we're too lenient. And they say, well, people can do whatever and you don't hold them accountable. You don't do anything. And so there's a tension there, right? Like one side, you know, wants less, one side wants more, and it's our job to balance it. And that's our job. But we sometimes do get pushback like, well, you don't do anything and people can just, you know, do whatever they want in Charlottesville and aren't held accountable. So it's a tightrope. We don't always get it right. But I think those are some criticisms that, you know, we need to be aware of and try and be attentive to. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you for that.
Well, no, I you know, one of the things I work on is decarceration, right? We can talk about it. They talking about building this, remodeling the jail, and what folks don't know, since the beginning of the pandemic, the population of jail folks staying in the jail had dropped tremendously, right? And dropped even more during the pandemic. And that was because of Joe and Jim figuring their way out to decarcerate, not put people in jail. What I know about prison and jails is it doesn't help anyone, right? If that community got some support systems can help that person to not reoffend, I think that's what we should focus our money and time in, right? Because it costs someone to be incarcerated $26,000, $30,000 a year, right? You know, and if you multiply by all those people who are incarcerated, that's a lot of money that could just be going back to the community. So I'm always going to be talking about decarceration. Joe know I'm always pushing to, I'll be honest with you, during the pandemic, the People's Coalition actually asked Joe and Jim and some other folks to reduce the population in the jail so people won't get sick from COVID, you know, and I think Joe worked with the People's Coalition and we work together to help that decarceration and also find folks places that some folks didn't have homes to go to. We found places for them to lay their heads. So for me, it's like we got to reimagine how we prosecute and what criminal justice look like in the future.
Yeah. Now that's important. So let's have that conversation, right? Because you made me think about sort of what Joe was saying a minute ago about how it's your job to sort of meet halfway and figure out the best solutions regardless of which side you're on, right? So Harold, like you even made me think about the whole defund movement, right? And I get your point of not wanting these grandiose incarceration facilities, you know, that's such a, like, you know, that would be such an eyesore really, to the community. And it's almost like a beacon, right? Of saying this is where we put people, right? So I get all that, but please allow the conversation to consider like the opposite end of the spectrum of what can be done to make sure that incarceration does mean rehabilitation, right? Or how, and it even makes me think about the whole like defund the police kind of thing. It's like, so in so many instances you need police, but you don't want to empower police to keep, committing atrocities on Black communities and neighborhoods, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So where's that balance in what you're saying of let's get people out, but at the same time they need their rehabilitation, or fact is there are some people who need to be separated and whatever that looks like from society because they could be detriments to their families or their communities. Like, so where's the middle ground?
Well, this is the thing I want to say about when people talk about defunding the police. They've been defunding education. They've been defunding everything that is possible that holds people's safety net for years. So the only thing we doing is we just put a label on it. But when you talk about legislators, they be like, oh, well, we can't fund this educational thing, right? But we go fund this. That's defunding, moving money around. But you're right. It is a balance, right? Because, some people do, cause really harm to the community, right? But I say to this, what is the reason for them doing that, right?
Right.
And it always end up being a substance abuse or mental health problem, right? That is not dealt with in the community because we don't have the funding for it. So that's why.
Or economic problem. People act out.
Economic, right? Business, right? We talk about Vinegar Hill. It devastated the Black community. We still haven't got businesses like we supposed to have because of what happened, right? And that was all about funding, right? So when you talk about defunding, please think about the other things that also is happening that is being defunded in our community.
Right. Absolutely. Joe, I'd be happy to hear, your perspective from a legal standpoint when it comes to, to the human rights side, but also sort of the security side. Right?
Yeah. Also, that conversation, listening to Harold, just made me think of something about criticism. So one of the things I've reflected on is Jim Hingley. We keep talking about, he's the elected prosecutor in the county of Albemarle. Jim hired me when he was opening the public defender's office in 1998. So I worked for Jim for 5 years. He's a mentor of mine. And we did look at the folks that were being incarcerated when COVID hit. And we took steps along with a lot of other partners, judges and defense attorneys and, community activists and the People's Coalition. And we did reduce the jail population during COVID. And so the question was, and things went just fine with community safety. So then the question was, well, why were they there in the first place, prosecutor? And so I think we've continued to ask ourselves, and Jim said this, let's not go back to doing business the old way. And then just COVID's passed, we can ramp the numbers back up again. So I think that was a legitimate criticism of the two prosecutors' offices. And I think Jim would agree with me, like, okay, this new model is working. Maybe incarcerating less folks doesn't really adversely affect community safety. The other thing is there are people. So I always say to our office, the culture we try and create is community safety balanced with the fair treatment of someone charged with a crime. And we are responsible as prosecutors for keeping the community safe.
Right.
And there are some folks that I personally believe need to be removed from society for a period of time for their own safety and the safety of the community. But what is happening to them and what are they doing while they're incarcerated? And Harold said it's right. It doesn't really help anyone when folks are over in the jail. It doesn't really make anything better. In fact, it may contribute to problems related to long-term housing and employment and different things like that, family relationships. So I think that's where we need to look at what rehabilitative programs are at the jail that folks can take advantage of while they're there, substance abuse, mental health disorders, education, to try that when they do reenter and are returning citizens and are back in the community, that we've had some transition and some resources available so they don't just come back in plunked with no lifelines. And I think we can do a better job of that. We haven't quite figured that out yet.
Yeah. So that lends the question, and Harold, you may have a point on this. Both of y'all really. But when you look at like the current prison system, right? Do we believe that's where the solution is capable of residing, or is it going to take the community organizations such as the many that you are a part of, Harold, to sort of like rehabilitate or to help with the reentry process? You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of us look at our criminal justice system and just see it as broken, like when it comes to the way that Black men and particularly get profiled and things of that sort, and then seeing sort of like the cycle and the pipeline, of when it comes to the prison system. So I'm curious on if you all are hopeful that system can be reconstructed, or is it going to take the community organizations to grab those hands, when when they come back in?
I give a good example. I have a fellow, legal aid. We hired organizing fellows, and one of the stipulations is that they had to be formerly incarcerated, right? My fellow was telling me a story about his reentry program that he went to in Dillon, I think, and he got there, and the lady said, "How many of y'all are here gonna get out next month?" He said, "I'll get out in 2 weeks." She said, "Okay, here, give him the book and say good luck." Right? That's what we have in the system. It's not really going to help anyone coming out. So yes, I think it is up to a lot of like nonprofit organization for profits to go in to talk to folks, right? For instance, I know some organizations going to the juvenile facilities to have conversation. I'm going into the juvenile facilities to have conversations, and the first thing I tell them is, "Come see me when you get out," right? Because no one else is going to help them. I always say this: people with lived experience is the best people to move issues, right? So you can't really move an issue if you've never been incarcerated, because you don't know what the issue really is. And what I realized too is, like, the younger generation, if we don't help them realize how important they are, our future's not going to look bright, right? And so, I always look for those ones that is like ostracized or say they, you're not, fit for community, because I was one of those guys, right? It took me years, to get where I'm at, but I want to also help someone else. I always say this to everybody. When I break the ceiling, I want everyone to come up the ceiling, because I think that's the way we should ride.
I like that. So we do have a question from the audience.
Yeah, this listener is curious to know from both guests your perspective on the vision you hold for restorative justice in Central Virginia.
So I'll answer that. Can I push back on one thing Harold just said?
Sure.
So Harold, you said there's no one there to help them. We do locally, and I'm not sure it's perfect, but we have a reentry council. And I think that our probation officers and the pretrial and post-trial court services folks at Offender Aid and Restoration, the great work that Tez and the Fountain Fund are doing, the Uhuru Foundation, there are a lot of resources locally, like you were lifting up some of the different things going on. There are a lot of different resources locally that are trying to be there to help folks when they get out. And the pop-up clinics and the Expungement Council. There's a decarceration and reentry clinic at the University of Virginia run by Kelly Oriens, I think is her name. So there's stuff going, but I think Harold also hit on a point. I am not an individual that has that lived experience. And I think folks that have those lived experiences have the most credibility and legitimacy and knowledge to do that work. But I feel like we do have some good resources locally. Absolutely. The answer to that question.
Wait a minute. I want to push back on you, Joe.
Please. Is that okay?
I never said locally. I said in the system.
Okay.
I'm not. I know it's a ton of things locally, right? But if you in the system and you get out, you still have to find those things. It's nothing in the system saying, "Hey, you should go there, A, B, and C." That's what I was talking about.
I got you.
So what do both of you think about the jail expansion?
You asking me?
Both of you.
Well, I want to be very careful. I don't think it's a jail expansion. Jim Hingley and I came out very strongly to say, because the architects were like, now is the time when we can expand and add more beds. Now is the time to do this when we're there doing this project. And we both came out very strongly and very publicly to say, we are totally opposed to expansion. We're totally opposed to adding more beds. We're for jail improvement to the extent that prosecutors have a voice in the process. But we were very clear, and they're like, well, populations are rising and crime trends are going to go up in the next 10 or 20 years. And we said, no, we feel like we can responsibly keep the community safe and not expand it. I'll turn it over to Harold there's still a lot of controversy on the improvements that are going to be made to the jail. I'm hopeful that it's in beds for folks with mental health issues and substance use disorders. So I'm hopeful it becomes for folks that have to be there, a more humane place with more humane resources and programming to help them. But I'll kick it over to Harold for.
Yeah, no, Joe is right. Joe can tell you about the process too, to make sure that the beds wouldn't expand. I'm sorry. But for me, and the books that I'm like dealing with, and most of them, a couple of them are like former incarcerated. We don't want the expansion. It's not an expansion. I'm sorry. They decided they wasn't going to expand, but what they're going to do is build up, right? For us, it is like the Taj Mahal, right? They want these big buildings, and I never heard of jails having rooms. And so that's what's confusing to us. Like, how you gonna have a jail? I thought jails had cells, not rooms, right?
Yeah. So I mean, to me, it sounds like psychologically, so it doesn't seem that bad. So if you get in trouble, it ain't gonna be that bad. But that sounds like a psychological.
Yeah, but this the thing though. People, there is a spot over there that they built in 2000 that has 40 pods, but 80 people can be in a pod, right? And they got a couple of them brand new. They don't put no one over there. And the reason why he don't put anybody in there is like he don't have the staff, because he don't know which one is beefing with each other, right? Yeah. But it's been like that for years. You never know who's gonna be with each other anyhow. I was over there. I did a stint over there, right? And so it was that happening, and whatever happens, you have to move on from it. But what I'm saying is a group called the People's Coalition Jail Committee, who's working on stopping the whole spec that he wants, because the spec could be up to $100 million, right? And so they created this design almost 18 months ago, when construction costs are different now, right? So when they did do the estimated cost, it was 49 million, but over 27 years is 73 million. And when I say 23 years, each locality had to pay out the money. They're gonna use bonds, but they still have to use their money, their tax money, to pay this back. So right now, well, not right now, they got some money from the state. Before they got the money from the state, the jail didn't have a debt. Now they're going to have a debt for 27 years that community people are going to have to pay back. And so what we at the community be like, hey, we want to make a decision on what we don't want over there.
And, and listening to your description of what the expansion or whatever we're calling it looks like. Renovation. What I also hear is that in order to substantiate the reason, justify the reason for this build, once it's, comes into reality, is there needs to be bodies in those cells or rooms.
That's right.
In order to convince people that this was, a worthy expense or cause. And,
And so some we saying, if you talking like that, do y'all know something we don't know? Right? Do you think there is like, one, I'm not going to say who the board of supervisor person is, but they on the ACLJ board, the Albemarle Shores Regional Jail Board, said, you don't know what the political wind is going to blow in here, right? And that was like, it can blow doo-doo in here. But we shouldn't think about incarcerating more people. And so, and when I say live expression, this person never probably stepped in a jail cell in her life. So
that's a fact of life that people got to wake up to, is that it's in many ways it's a for-profit system too. Let's not confuse ourselves thinking that it's just a service to the community that's just there just in case. There's experiences I won't even go into right now that prove that it's like there's a for-profit benefit to it for some folks,
especially the phones.
And and I want to make sure that you answer the listener's question as well. Max asked that she was curious to know the perspective of what the vision hold for restorative justice in Central Virginia. I know Joe touched on it. I don't think you touched on it.
Oh, can I just say I missed it. I just want to say, is that right, Harold?
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're starting the third year of our local restorative justice program. And thank you for the question, listener. And I'm sorry, I totally sidetracked us. But there's a wonderful website. It's CVCJ, Central Virginia Community Justice. If you Google that, it's an amazing website. My vision, and I'll kick it over to Harold, is I think we're learning a whole new vocabulary in the criminal legal system where you're not talking about defendants. You're talking about the party that caused harm. You're not saying victim. You're talking about the harmed party. And it's giving both of those individuals agency to come together and do things in a totally non-traditional way where they're able to sit down and try and address and repair the harm without this punitive punishment, conviction-driven mindset. And so my vision is that we start to change the vocabulary that we use to sort of divert more cases to that. And it's going to be a long process, in my opinion.
Yeah. And real quick, Joe, something you said too, the fact that you work to try to get people out of prison would mean that there's grounds, because you've been, like the legal expert here, that means that there's grounds to where maybe these people shouldn't have been incarcerated in the first place. You know what I mean? So I think that's something that shouldn't be overlooked. Of the fact that when you talk about, the restorative and the reformation of it all, of us, even if we weren't trying to renovate the jail, the fact that we need people like Joe working to see, all right, what people can we, bring back to their families?
Yeah, exactly.
Like what people can still be contributing to our community, and instead of an overreaching, criminal justice system that's keeping them in there.
And the one interesting, this is a legal wonky thing, but it's called a pre-plea system. Mm-hmm. So to do restorative justice, the person charged doesn't have to plead guilty or admit they did anything. And we've got all sorts of protections in place so it can't be used against them what they say. So it's a pre-plea system. So you don't have to plead guilty or have a conviction for the most part. And it's aspirationally for straight dismissal, misdemeanors and felonies. So not everything has to say, well, at the end of the day, we'll let you work it down to a misdemeanor. That if it goes well in the most ideal situation, it's a pure dismissal. So that's also a benefit.
Well, we trying to get that in the drug court too.
We are.
That's right. Because folks have to plead guilty to something, but then, they work their way through it. But once you plead guilty to a felony, it's hard to get a job. Yeah. It's hard to get education and some forms of education and housing. And I think this is a good segue going to the expungement stuff. But so the question, restorative justice, I think I'm going to defer to Joe because Joe hit it right on the nose, right? But it's other programs that the People's Coalition also is looking to research so we can present it to City Council or Charlottesville, the police department. What I understand too, and I'm just going to say it, it's easier to work with Charlottesville than Albemarle because Albemarle sometimes don't think they have a problem. And so, and I'm not talking about Jim. Jim totally understands it, right? But some folks in government in Albemarle don't believe they got a housing problem. Don't believe they have a police problem. They don't believe these things are happening because they are like in the wind looking at other things. So I like working with Charlottesville because Charlottesville is always the model of places. Good example. One of the things that the People's Coalition first started to fight for when in the beginning of the People's Coalition was the oversight board. Right. And now with the community push and everything, Charlottesville has the most strongest oversight board in Virginia. Right. Okay. And so that's why I say Charlottesville is a model. Right. And Jim had her on. And Jim and Joe is actually making that model get even better and moving things along.
And an oversight board for the listeners is a PCOB, a Police Civilian Oversight Board. So citizens.
Officer Gonzalez is in charge of that now.
Yeah, right? Citizens that are involved in an organization that's involved in police oversight. Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, then we're going to make sure that we close with all the details the folks need to know about the clinic and the work around that. Does that sound good? All right. Yeah. Thank y'all. So I am HO family. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back with Joe and Harold to give us all the details of the upcoming expungement clinic happening this Thursday morning in Seville. All right, be right back. Tell a friend. Sir Charles Miss Max still here, still in the booth in the building with none other than Legal Aid Justice Center and the Expungement Council and the clinic that they have coming up this Thursday morning. Want to make sure everybody knows the details around that event. So it's been a minute since y'all were with us last time, but we were talking about the last clinic you had. So tell us sort of what to expect with this one. Like, what were the accomplishments of the last one, sort of leading into this one?
The accomplishments we help I think maybe 14 people, 15 people. That's a small number, but it's a big number for us because it gave those people some league room to like get employment and get housing if they might need it. We looking to double that number this go around. I want to thank for real. I want to shout out Joe and Jim for being able to, because without them, this couldn't happen really. And so I want to thank y'all so much for that because it gives people opportunity to have upper mobility because then it is nothing a barrier that's going to stop them in terms of their criminal justice. Their criminal record.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we are talking about Thursday, November 9th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at City Space, the Expungement Clinic, Charlottesville, brought to you by the Expungement Council and Legal Aid Justice Center. Where you guys state criminal records can prevent you from obtaining housing, employment, and educational opportunities. Come to the clinic to get eligible charges off your record to ease these obstacles. I don't think that can be repeated enough. But Joe, definitely want you to chime in on what you would want folks to know leading into the clinic.
Yeah, well, it's sort of sad to me that prosecutors have to be thanked for doing what's fair and just. And, that's one of the problems. And going back to elections and why we need delegates and senators in Virginia to help to continue to improve the law in this area. And there's some changes coming in 2025. They're very technical and complicated. And so the biggest takeaway that I think Harold and I want to have people understand and the listeners understand and spread the word on is certain convictions are going to be eligible for expungement starting in 2025. Right now, you can't expunge anything that resulted in a conviction, but that's going to change in 2025. It's not as far as we need to go on expungement law, but it's an improvement and it's a step in the right direction. But I think the biggest thing that Harold and a bunch of other folks are doing is just increasing awareness. I think there's a pop-up reentry clinic Thursday, and Whitmore Merrick's going to be running people from there to City Space. I think he's got a vehicle lined up.
Yes, indeed.
Whitmore's a community leader and community activist. And so just starting to spread the word that there's good stuff going on, and we want people to take advantage of it.
Yeah, it definitely shouts out to Whitmore. His transportation service that he has, Whitmore Merrick, and also you all already mentioned the great work that the folks like your Huru and so many others in the community that's doing to help this work. So wanted to make sure that you all also give folks the details when it comes to the registration and the filing fee coverage. What details do they need to know around those two things?
I'm going to say this first before you think you are eligible. The only thing I think Joe mentioned that you can get expunged, and this is a history about expungement. The last time the law was created was 1974, and they haven't touched it since then. So the only way you can get something really sealed on your record is to have a non-process and a dismissal. So if you have a non-process and a dismissal, you are eligible to get that sealed or expunged, one of the two. That's a wordplay too that folks have.
It goes away and it's not on your record anymore, and it's not showing up anywhere.
Yep. So that's so if you call me and say, Harold, I got a conviction for blah blah blah, I'm gonna tell you can't come. You might want to think about in 25. And so that way you don't have to worry about coming down there and getting kind of your feeling hurts. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, people get excited if they can get their records. I be on the phone with people, and soon as I say, "Hey, was it a dismissal or a non-process?" They be like, "No," and that whole, there's tons of bricks hit them. Like, oh my goodness, right?
But even if that's the case, like, could they still come in and get educated on?
Yeah, so we definitely, the Expungement Council does like presentations about what is in the law for 25 and what's like the possibilities for now until 25. But I think Joe's right. We want to expand it a little bit more where it's not so much technical things, because there's certain things in 25 that you can't get charged for this or that for the 7 years. And we really want to say, like, if your record been, if you haven't been in trouble for so long, this, get that off your record unless it's some like heinous crime, like against a child or something, but I think it is.
But we're there to answer questions for anyone that wants to come to City Space 10 to 3 Thursday.
Okay, that's important.
We're there to answer any questions anyone has, and there's no cost to anyone.
None.
Okay, yeah. Because I saw on the flyer anything you all wanted to mention on how to register, whether you pre-register or like what's necessary for that.
I don't know if it's registration on that.
Oh yeah, the flyer. Yeah, so the flyer says that you can pre-register by going to Expungement Clinic, Seville. And it looks like there's a link through the Legal Aid Justice site as well. But it says if you do not register, though, like you're able still to attend.
Yeah. So if you don't register this, like I said, we can talk to you about what is possible. So, for instance, we had more walk-ins than we had folks register last time, and those walk-ins had some other charges. But what I realized is you don't see one person with one charge that needs to be sealed or expunged. People have many charges, and one of those charges that probably needs to be expunged is one of those important charges, like a failure to appeal, right? So, since you got a failure to appeal and it got dismissed, it's not going to be dismissed on your record. It's still going to be there in case. And then the reason why I say that, because most time we get in trouble again. And if that's on your file, they're not going to let you out because they're going to say you had a failure to appeal. So we're trying to help people in many ways as we can. So that's a good example. Yes.
A couple of things. So do you have to, I'm sorry, I haven't seen the flyer, but do you have to have a photo ID to get the process rolling on getting things expunged?
I don't believe you do now.
All right. And then what is the kind of time frame to have your charges expunged or sealed?
So one of the reasons behind the expungement clinic that we're running is it's sort of like one-stop shop, do everything. So the University of Virginia Police Department's providing fee fingerprinting. There's attorneys there to help prepare petitions. There's law students that can go run back and forth between the courts. The judges, the local judges have been wonderful and agreeing to sign orders that are presented to them. So I think we're hopeful the turnaround's a week or two if everything's lined up. But the most important thing is, even if we don't do everything in a week or two, come by, educate yourself, learn your options, get questions answered, get linked up with all the different resources we have, because we do expungements year round, and we can help you year round if it's a Charlottesville or Albemarle charge. And if it's somewhere else, we can sort of give you guidance on that. So if we don't get you the ideal situation Thursday, we can at least get the process started.
Okay. And then last question, this kind of expanded expungement program that is going to be in place in 2025, is that a done deal, or could that be revoked, repealed?
So they got it's in so they looked at the law that was passed, and they sent it to I forgot what they said. They sent it to another legislative branch to look at. I forgot what the legislative branch is, but we want to push for more. So yes, there is something that's going to be coming out to clean up some of the mess that this is. But what I want to say, just how crazy we talk about defund and fund, just how crazy things is. They couldn't get this law quicker because the state is working with MS-DOS, not the system MS-DOS. And so they couldn't get the system up fast enough because they had to go get money from the state to even change their way of. And when I say MS-DOS, MS-DOS is an old program that was what in the 90s, right?
And I didn't even know that, but I'll still vouch for it because people will be surprised on the state of Virginia and how behind database systems are.
Yep.
You would be surprised.
Yep. And so we actually is helping them catch up. And what we're trying to do is, like, how I say it, like Joe said, elections mean something, right? And so we know we probably won't get anything for another 2 years, but we're going to be pushing for legislation, right? I got another analogy. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And when these type of things, you have to have the longevity, because you're not going to get something just tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank y'all for that. So Joe and Harold, as always, thank y'all for being such a great resource and community servant, working for the people. So November 9th, Thursday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at City Space. Folks can get even further detail. And if they need to follow up with you all on any level, how can they reach you?
They can call me on my phone, on my cell phone. My number is 434-409-0791. And I don't mind giving it out because at one time was helping people get their rights back. And so my number been out through the state. That's another thing that you should have a conversation about too, is how the state took all those people rights back from them, or didn't give them rights back to vote, to bear arms. And that just happened under the new administration.
And I'll respond to anyone. It's Platania@charlottesville.gov, and my direct dial 434-970-3179. That's 24/7. Just leave a voicemail and a callback number, and I will make sure to get back with you.
Sounds good. You want to take us to break, Ms. Max?
I just want to thank our guests for being here with us today. And I hope that as many people as possible will show up. If you can take advantage of this expungement clinic, please show up, make the effort. If you can provide transportation for someone to be a part of this clinic and get some charges that may be hindering them in life removed from their records, then please do that. Help them.
IMHO Talk Show.